Welcome to today's Instagram Live. This is our weekly Tuesday Live, which happens at 1 p.m. Eastern every Tuesday. And in this month of September, our overall theme is spiritual business, having a business based on your gifts. And there's a couple of topics that I want to drop in about related to that today. So welcome to everybody who's hopping on live. You're welcome to ask questions while you're live. Welcome to everybody on the replay as well. So yesterday we had our free masterclass on creating a thriving business based on sharing your soul's gifts. It was a really powerful transmission, and I wanted just to share that up front. If anything that I'm talking about here, this call to create a structure for your gifts, this call to work for God, work for yourself, give, as the I Ching says, an enduring form to the gifts of the Spirit. If that's something that is calling to you, you're resonating with what I'm sharing, and you want to go deeper, then that free masterclass is your next stop. You can comment here on the live or in the replay, just the word masterclass, and then my internet elves will send you the link. So what are we going to talk about today? Today I want to talk about the stages of spiritual business, and I want to talk about the life cycle of your gifts. So let's start with the life cycle of your gifts. This is the concept that each of us we come with innate gifts, right? We come with the kind of factory installed settings of our soul, the stuff that we're really innately good at, our passions, our interests, and our visions, right? The things that we absolutely love. We also come with trials and challenges, especially at this time, right? This really transformational lifetime that we're in right now. And if you have a connection with that, with where we are in the life cycle of humanity's healing and rebirth, then you know what I'm talking about. So some of our gifts, I'll share an example for myself. I've always loved to learn, and I've always loved to teach. Like, I was that kid who was playing teacher with my siblings. By the time I was 14 years old, I was giving myself the assignment to give presentations to my peers about topics that I cared about. In some ways, teaching is part of my artistry. It's one of my creative gifts. It's something that I absolutely love to do and love to nerd out about. And I find myself innately doing that. And I have throughout my entire life, although the subject of what I've been teaching has evolved and changed quite a bit. And so that's an innate gift. But then we also have the gifts that we receive through trial and initiation. And I know that if you're listening to this and you resonate, that you know what I'm talking about, right? This experience where we go through really intense hardship, where we're looking around and we cannot find the solution, right? There seems to be no path, right? We're in that, as Krishnamurti says, the pathless land, right? We cannot find our way. This could be a health crisis, this could be relationships, this could be different types of healing, right? It's usually connected to an experience of suffering, right? An experience of going through something very challenging, your dark night of the soul, and having to get to this place of surrender where you essentially summon in divine intervention and a solution reveals itself to you over time. And sometimes it's connected more to a kind of a gap that you're seeing in the world, more of a less suffering, more of a vision where you're like, why doesn't this exist, right? We should have this beautiful experience. We should have this non-toxic product. But even that, like even our big, beautiful visions are usually connected to an experience of lack or disconnection that we are having, right? There's someone whose supplements I absolutely love. I actually have a couple of friends who have different supplement brands, but this one guy, shout out to Adam from Lifeblood, is the name of his company. and he makes the purest supplements. He makes just really clean, absolutely no fillers, just the best possible supplements that exist, and they're really accessible and affordable. And he created that company a couple of years ago when there were already many different supplement companies, right? There were already tons of people in the market, but he saw a gap, right? He, in his own healing journey, was like, I can't source what I need for myself, so I'm going to go make it. And this is the life cycle of our gifts, where we are faced with that gap. And I really believe that each of us are almost assigned problems and challenges that we go through. And in embracing that, which can be very humbling, but also there's a dignity to it, right? There's a kind of humble dignity to, this is hard, but there's a reason that I'm going through it. And when we don't give up, which is why I'm always saying don't give up, right? Keep going. When we don't give up and we sincerely engage with that problem, we eventually pop out into a reality where we have a solution. And we have a solution that it tastes different. It tastes like a home-cooked meal. It doesn't taste like something you can just Uber Eats. It tastes like something that is real. There's like an organic, authentic quality to it, where you're like, I don't care what anybody says. I know that I went through this and I have something substantial here. And when we reach that point, it is then our invitation to share that with the world. That is the life cycle of the gift. And then we're going to get into the stages of spiritual business, which kind of go deeper into the one part of the life cycle. So we go through these intensities, we have our breakthrough, and then it's time for us to give the gift. As the I Ching says, and you've probably heard me quote this line before, I just love it. It's time to give an enduring form to the gifts of the Spirit. Now, some things that we go through, we give that gift, we pass it on, which is the natural kind of ripening of an experience. We pass that on in a really simple way, right? You refer a friend to a product, you meet someone who you're meant to kind of just tell them about what you learned. We have all kinds of sort of small moments like that. There are plenty of things that I've discovered that are not the core essence of my transmission, but I still share them and kind of weave them in here and there. Even things like a lot of the work I've done around physical healing, around circadian rhythm, around focus and deep work. Things like that that's not the essence of my highest soul's contribution, but it's kind of like toppings or ingredients that get to be woven throughout. So not everything becomes that gift that is truly ours to give, but we all have a couple, right? We all have a couple of experiences that give us these hard-won solutions. And I know that if you're listening to this, you have your version of this. You already have some connection to it. And then it's our invitation and our job to turn that into a form that can bless other people. And this is it's like a sacred rite of passage where you emerge from the trial to give that gift. And it requires a shift in perspective, because often when we've been very humbled by the intensities of life, we don't necessarily feel so good. We don't necessarily feel like, I'll give an example of someone who I know someone now who teaches money healing, right? Who teaches healing your relationship with money. And that's a main thing that she does. Previously, she was deeply struggling with money, right? She was deeply struggling with her relationship with it, with making it, keeping it, all of that. And there's a moment in that process where she had to shift and see, wow, I actually am shifting and changing, and I do have something to offer here. And I need to sort of see myself not as someone who's at the effect of the problem, but someone who's actually a steward of the solution. So this brings us into the stages of business. And those of you who are live, you're welcome to ask questions. You're welcome put in the chat as well, what are your gifts? What have you gone through that you are now starting to feel this invitation to turn it into something significant, something that other people can benefit from? And of course, this is a very meta level conversation we're having here, because I'm literally doing this right now. Everything that I do on my platform, the different topics that I teach on, they're all things that I was once in a dark night of the soul about, that I then developed an integrated understanding of the solution, a path forward, and now I'm answering the call to pass it on and to continue to do that with devotion. And that brings us into the idea of stages of spiritual business. And we talked about this a lot more in the masterclass yesterday, slides, details, but I want to give just kind of a riff and a summary on it. And you can, of course, watch the masterclass if you want to go deeper. So stages of spiritual business. I see 4 stages. Stage number 1 is initiation. This is what we just talked about at the beginning of the life cycle of your gifts, where your gifts are essentially potentiated and activated, where maybe there's a potentiation happening because you're being given opportunities, right? You're being kind of put on stage literally or metaphorically, or, I remember the first time I was actually at a retreat that I wasn't really supposed to be facilitating. This was not a wellness retreat. This was like a youth activists, a million people living in a group house preparing for the revolution type situation way back in the day, in my past life, in this life, when I was doing a lot of kind of direct action activism and community organizing. And I would think I was supposed to maybe speak a little bit, but it was a very small role, and I was mostly there just to kind of help the other organizers who were kind of like the big kids. They were maybe 2 to 4 years older than me, but when you're young, you have that feeling of like, they're so much older than me. And I remember something changed. I think someone got sick, or basically someone just handed me a workshop outline and said, "You're teaching this." And I was scared, but as soon as I got up in front of the group and I followed the outline, but it was like someone handed me a piano, and I was meant to be a concert pianist, and I had just never had that experience of having the instrument that was mine to play. And for me, teaching and holding space for people is huge. And so I remember the feeling of oh my God, I actually like this. I feel really in flow. And that's an example of an initiation of a gift, a potentiation of a gift. And thank you for the question here. I'm going to get to that in a second. So another way that the gifts are initiated is what I said in terms of trial, in terms of the work that I do now around spiritual business. Did I think that I would be on Instagram Live talking about how to have a business based on your gifts? Absolutely not. Right? This is just a portion of the work that I do. I'm not just a business coach teaching business, but I truly feel I have a spiritual responsibility to pass on what I have learned, because I've spent a decade trying to figure it out and then eventually figuring it out, right? A decade of, how do I put my work out there? What is my work? What form are my gifts supposed to take? How do I do that in a way that provides for me? How do I heal all of my programmed resistance to money? How do I literally feed myself? How do I say yes to this path when God is closing all of the other doors, but I still don't really know what to do? How do I do it in a way that's in alignment? All these other kind of 3D business coaches are just selling me these templates, and they seem to work for other people, but they don't work for me, because I'm here to discover my own way, my own path. And that's an example of trial, intensity, and then eventually, how do I have this embodied understanding of the life cycle of your gifts, the stages of spiritual business? Because I've lived it, and because also in the initiation phase, life, God, creation, the soul fractal has brought me more and more and more clients and students, friends, allies on the path who I've supported through this process as well. So I have a lot of data at this point. So phase 1, which is really phase 0, is initiation. It's the invitation to answer the call. We're going to talk about the next 3 phases. I want to see this question here. I love what you said around not feeling great when life humbles us and becoming the steward of what we were called to help people with from what we've gone through. But what do you think is the moment to transition from the depths of feeling badly to becoming a steward? That's such a good question. Such a good question. So basically, like, when is that moment of shift? And you queued me up perfectly because we're talking about this initiation phase and then what's the second phase. Ultimately, only you will know, right? Only you can, and it's great to know your human design decision-making authority, and that's something that I teach in my programs, in God is My Boss, and in other containers that I hold. Getting to know your decision-making authority, where you have that inner knowing of like, okay, now is the time. But something we also talked about in the masterclass yesterday that was it was one of the biggest breakthroughs that many people had in the class yesterday, was realizing that they had been putting off stepping forward because they were waiting for the perfect time, and that they had all of these conditions of, okay, when I'm more confident, when I have more money, when my parents support me, when this, blah, 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 blah. And there were a lot of people having this realization of, oh, I've actually been delaying. Like, I haven't been stepping forward when I could. And this is why I like to highlight the stages, because sometimes we think, okay, it's just between initiation and then like public figure expert on that subject. And not everything reaches that level, right? Not everything becomes something that we teach in a way where the world knows our name for that thing. There's 2 phases before that. The next phase is experimentation. So there's a time where we start to receive divine invitations through people saying, hey, can you talk to me about this? And this is actually a great next action for the person who's asking this question, and anybody who resonates, is you basically say to God, put me in, coach, show me, like, I am willing to begin to step forward. I'm willing to share this. Put me in, coach. Let me know, right? Let me know when it's time. Give me the opportunity so I don't even have to question if it's time. It just is time. Someone's asking me about it. Life is inviting it forward for me. And this is also part of just the lifestyle of living a divinely guided life, where when you have your own spiritual practice and you have your own devotional relationship with God, creator, life, however you think of it, higher self, where every single day you are saying, my will to thy will, I want to live the divine plan for my life. That is when every day you see the miracles, every day you see the synchronicities, and you have this rooted trust. Not even a trust, it's just a knowing that you're on your path. You have this knowing that you are being guided, and you have this deeper trust that if and when it is time for you to step forward, it will be. And I speak about that from client experience, right? I've coached hundreds, if not thousands of people on this at this point, definitely personally hundreds, and then thousands in my programs over the years. And also for myself, right? I didn't get the push to go online to start sharing a message until I surrendered my life to my higher power, to God, and said, do with me what you will. And then all of a sudden the invitation started to come, and there were step after step after step where I felt like I was being stretched, like I was my lower self, my younger self, my scared self was like, whoa, can I do this? And it was just enough for my higher self to say, yes, we can do this. We're going to take this next step, and then more is going to reveal from there. So a lot of people have that experience in the initiation phase where they're like, how could I even have a business or put my work out there or have my message or what even is my message? And they kind of get super overwhelmed because all they're seeing is other people's end state, or at least like a highly mature expression of their work, and they're saying, how do I go from here to there? Of course, there are overnight soul activation moments where people go from hiding to having hundreds of thousands of followers and just being in the maturation of their gifts because it's their time and the world is ready for it. That totally can happen. And there is a growth process, and it's very nourishing to allow yourself to be where you are. I will tell a story, which I mentioned in the masterclass somewhat yesterday, which is when I was 5 years old. It was about to be, I think it was first grade, and we went and we got our textbooks. Shout out to the olden days when we had textbooks. Went to get our textbooks at the beginning of school, and I remember very Virgo season energy, like, okay, I got my textbooks, and I remember looking at them and getting really overwhelmed and saying to my mom, like, oh my God, I don't know any of this. Like, I don't know any of this math stuff and this. I can barely read. I'm 5 years old. And I got really stressed out. And my mom was just like, hold on. This is what you're going to learn. This is your whole year in a book. You don't have to know it all right now. You just need to have the book, and then your teacher's going to walk you through it. And it's kind of a silly example, but a lot of us do that with our calling, where we're like, okay, I got to have it all. I got to already be at the end state, when the whole point is the journey. So after the initiation phase, where you have that kind of awakening moment on some level, you go into experimentation. This is where you are allowing yourself to experiment with the form that your gifts want to take. This looks like putting stuff out there. If you're like, am I supposed to be a baker? Let me make some cupcakes for my neighbors. Let me make oatmeal raisin. Let me make chocolate chip. Let me make them gluten-free. Let me make them with protein in them. Let me, you start to play with it. If you, let's use a more tangible example. Maybe you've gone through a detox journey, like a really deep health journey, and you're like, am I supposed to teach about this? You might just put out a free info session for people and say, hey, I'm going to share about my experience of this detox protocol. And if you want to know more, here you go. Right? And maybe you end up teaching that in that way. Maybe, you become like Adam and you're creating your own supplement line. You won't know until you start. The clarity comes through the action, right? The clarity comes through getting in the game, and you actually get more energy as you're going, because you start to get this feedback loop where you are learning in your own self, does this feel aligned for me? And you're also seeing the response. You're seeing people, and you don't get that external confirmation right away, especially if you're here to heal need for external validation, which a lot of people are, or you're here also to heal like fear of rejection. You might face a lot of that as part of your initiation, as part of your growth. But at a certain point, you are blessed with the grace of another human being who looks at you and says, thank God you exist. Thank you so much for telling this story, for creating this product, for putting this out there. And it will likely come at a moment where you're like, what was that even good enough? Like, is it even possible for me to do this? And you get that confirmation where someone says, even in your messiness, even in your experimentation, because this is also cellular, right? So it's a cellular transmission of the integration that you have. So before someone even gets your detox protocol, being in your presence helps them feel more healed, helps them feel that healing is possible, right? Before if you're meant to go deeper with me on the subject of spiritual business, before we even do any work together, you're receiving something just from the fact that I've done it, right? Just from the fact that I can tell you stories of many other people who have done it, right? So there's lots of layers to the service, and you will eventually get that confirmation. And welcome to those who are joining. We're talking about the stages of spiritual business. So you're experimenting in that second phase. You're throwing stuff against the wall. You're like, is it this thing? Is it that thing? And it's the point is just to put the reps in. And over time, you're going to start to see trends. You're not going to be granted, most people are not granted a massive vision right away where it's like, here's your 8-figure spiritual business where you're going to scale this specific product to this specific person. That is the old paradigm. You may eventually end up in those same circumstances with total clarity about, this is my product, this is who I'm serving, let's freaking go. I'm ready for everybody to receive it. But your initiation is about walking by faith and not by sight. And so you got to take that next step, that next right indicated action. And 2 resources on that. I put up a reel recently where I was talking about when you feel called but you're confused about your next steps, the practice of a morning meeting with God followed by an immediate next right action, no matter how small or insignificant it seems, that creates very powerful momentum. It's especially important when you're going from initiation to experimentation. And I also have a free version of a morning meeting with God audio. If you type the letters MMWG, morning meeting with God, in the comments, wherever you're seeing this, my internet elves will send it to you. And it's also at the link in my bio. It's totally free. It's 7 minutes long. It's a way of walking through what I'm talking about here. So you've got initiation, you've got experimentation, and then from experimentation, you go to iteration. So this is where something starts to emerge and you say, whoa, there's something here. Like the gift that I've been given. And remember, we're not just talking about, oh, this is a good idea. We're talking about something that moves you on a heart and soul level. Something where you're like, I'm on fire for this existing. I am on fire for this solution. Yesterday, I was listening to a meditation in my program, God is My Boss, which is opening up. And I was just tuning in to check the audio and to just kind of prepare things energetically for people who are coming in. And I was so moved by my own creation, by my own work. I just had this moment of so much emotion, of gratitude that I get to transmit these teachings, and that heart on fire feeling of like, yes, I'm so glad this exists, and I want the right people to receive it because I know what it's like to not have this thing. Right? So creating the things that we wish existed, not just the things that we think, oh, the market timing is good for this, and I saw someone on a podcast say that we need more companies like this. No. It will logically make sense eventually, and it may even be, may satisfy your mind right now what you're doing, but it's got to have that heart feeling of this is super connected to my true core path and the things that only I can share, right? The things that I have a unique perspective on. So we're going from this initiation to experimentation to iteration. And in iteration, there's something that's standing out that you're then going to refine. I will give I'll give 2 examples of this. So actually, I'll give 3. One, we've been talking about the supplement detox example, right? So someone who's reaching the iteration phase, this is where they're saying, whoa, a lot of people are really liking my magnesium product that I just kind of put out there. I made 20 units of it and people started to buy it. Is the packaging right? Is the product right? Is there anything that I can do to improve it? Iterating. Someone who's doing a detox protocol. Maybe they took their first group through it. How did it go? What went well that they can do a better job of or they can keep doing? What needs to be changed? How could they take even better care of their clients? Are there things that happened that they didn't expect that they now need to create a resource for or change the structure of? You only get to the final phase, which is maturation, which is this perfected refinement of the giving of the gift when you go through the iteration. And so the shift, and we talked about this in the masterclass yesterday, the shift between experimentation and iteration is experimentation, it's like you have to just let yourself almost be curious and creative and kind of in the flow. And it's almost a more adolescent energy where you're just like, I feel lit about this. Let's see how this goes. And then you reach this place with iteration where you say, okay, I'm going to commit. There's something that's standing out here that I'm not going to reach for another shiny object. I'm going to say there's something here. People keep asking me a question related to it. It's connected to my soul's path, the lessons that I've learned. I want this to exist, so I'm going to commit to it, and I'm going to refine it and refine it and refine it. Another example, my beloved Christina, who's going to join us for the next Tuesday live, so I'm going to interview her. She agreed. I'm going to interview her about her own business and her own path of sharing her gifts. Really powerful, unique, initiatory story. She has many gifts. She's a manifesting generator. And her original career was journalism and being a writer and an editor. She went all the way to the New York Times, extremely talented. And as she went through her awakening, the activation of her soul's gifts, the activation of her intuition, really stepping into her power as an intuitive guide, doing creative feminine work with people, people started to come to her saying, hey, will you edit and help me write my book of spiritual initiation and transformation? And so she was being invited again and again by life, by people, to combine those skills. And as that happened over time, she started to see this process, this type of book, this transformational story that she didn't see a model for, that people were coming to her because there wasn't a map that fit them. And their story meant so much to them that they couldn't just put it into an old template. And so she started to create this process that she now calls the story map, that she takes people through to tell their stories of transformation, to create those books that their souls came here to write. That's something that she has iterated to use this to keep tracking to our stages of business. She has iterated that. She's taught many one-on-one clients. She has taught it in a group format, and she's once again recording the teachings again in a more distilled, more succinct form. And it's part of her divine assignment. Does she do other things? Yes, she runs amazing retreats. She does soul level guidance with people. She has her own writing, her own creative writing that's amazing. And she does Gene Keys work. She's a manifesting generator. She's got a lot of gifts. But this gift of the story map is an essential assignment that she has, that she's meant to take all the way, right? Initially, it was just the activation of it, that initiation, experimenting. Can I really help people with this? Yes. Iteration to bring it to a healthy and distilled form. And healthy, I just mean it's like the natural, robust, correct, aligned form. And then eventually it goes to maturation, which is story map living in a way where, what's recorded this year will be what people are watching in 5 years. And there's just like a book where you get it to a place where you say, I've done my job. I've given an enduring form to the gifts of the Spirit. So that's one example. Another example on a very meta level is what I've been doing with God as My Boss, which is now in its 3.0 form after 5 years of the program and multiple years before that of teaching it one-on-one. And the doors are actually now open for the 3.0 version. Today is the day. We have a spacious period of having this conversation and inviting people in who want to go deeper. God is My Boss at this point. I could not say this before, but through the iteration and the maturation process, it has become a complete guide to creating a successful business based on your spiritual and creative gifts. That is, when I think about the 1.0 version of God is My Boss 5 years ago, it was the initial transmission of these teachings. It was the absolute best I could do based on my understanding at the time, what I had already learned about having a successful business based on my gifts. The people who took that program, some of you might even be on this live, had amazing experiences. And I heard all the time from people saying this changed my life. And then I continued to see, as I grew, as I developed more, there were more things that I could teach. I saw people still having aspects of the process where they needed more support, where I had new tools that I could offer. And so I kept adding those. I taught it again last year. That's when we did 2.0. Through that experience, it got even better. People had great results, and I learned more about how to make it even better. This year, the teachings are in their most distilled chef's kiss version. I may iterate one more time after this one, but it's getting to this place where it's truly ready to stand the test of time. And there's a level of completion and maturation where that experimentation, that iteration, that trying things on, seeing how it's going, being very involved to ensure that people are having the best possible result, that's all created the more mature version of this offering now. But the point that I really want to make is that I would not be in this place where I'm looking with so much satisfaction at what I have created and so much excitement for the people who get to experience it. And even the masterclass that I did yesterday, I said to Christina after, I was like, that is the most dialed in and helpful expression of these teachings that I've ever done. And I never would have gotten there if I had wanted it to be that perfect at the very beginning. And if I had said, I need to have my frameworks and my stages of business and the life cycle of your gifts and, all of that, if I had held myself to that standard at the beginning, we wouldn't even be having this conversation because I wouldn't even be in the game. I would just be saying, I disqualify myself on account of not being perfect, so I'm not even going to try. No, what I did instead was sincerely with correct expectations, not promising anything I can't give, but just saying this is what I have to offer now. I've done that again and again and again and again, answering that call. And then that has produced this more refined body of work. So that's really the invitation that I wanted to give you today in my morning meditation. I was like, God, out of everything we talked about in the masterclass, what's the big highlight for folks on Instagram today? And this was it, to right size where you are in the process, because it's, honestly it can be very cruel to your current self who is recovering from, emerging from intensity and initiation, to then hold yourself to a standard of illusory perfection rather than accepting I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. My path is perfect. And what is my current assignment? So if my assignment is just accept that I've been initiated and say yes to figuring out how to share my gifts, amazing. If I'm at the experimentation stage, how am I going to try 10 different ways of giving my gifts in the next 90 days? And try this way, try that way, try this way. And just see what sticks. See what starts to feel right to me. Also within that, can I start doing my morning meeting with God if I'm not doing it already, so I can actually be divinely guided through the process and not just relying on my beautiful and yet underpowered brain, which doesn't have access to the full field of infinite intelligence that has a higher plan for you. If you've already been experimenting and you're resonating with the iteration where you're like, yeah, okay, there's something that keeps happening, like Christina with her story map, it's time for me to say yes to it. It's time for me to commit to taking it all the way, to giving it the time. It's like someone who realizes that they're going to make a perfect chocolate chip cookie recipe. Or Christina and I, we love to watch Chef's Table, and you see some of these chefs, and it's like, how did they create that amazing recipe? Number one, because they realized that they had to do it their way and that they couldn't just keep trying to follow in their mentor's footsteps. A lot of them, we talked about this in the masterclass, a lot of the chefs in Chef's Table have the same story where they essentially completely crashed out and failed trying to follow the plan that was laid out for them, cooking in a more traditional way and they reach this moment of, okay, everything's already fallen apart, so I might as well do what I really want to do. That's when they start to innovate. They start to create these amazing new recipes and a signature style that then results in their success, right? That's the thing that they're meant to scale and mature with, because it's really theirs. So for some of you, you're realizing that it's time to put in those reps. Some of those chefs are, they're working on their sourdough recipe for 10 years. That perfect chocolate chip cookie that you have when you walk into that store that's exactly the same every single time might have taken them 5 years. And how many tens of thousands of dollars of sugar and flour and eggs and all of that, right? So for some of you, the invitation is, I'm embracing my iteration phase, and I'm going to offer this, practice this, teach this, whatever the form of your gifts is, again and again until I feel that satisfaction of, I've really done right by this. And make sure it's connected to your heart. Make sure it's connected to not just a good idea, but if you were to watch a movie of your life and the things that you've already been through, what would be so obvious to you that's like, that's their thing, right? Do they even remember how much they struggled with that? And for a lot of you, it's like, once you've come out of the initiation phase, you need to keep a finger on that pulse of what you've been given, what you've learned, because it can be very easy to overlook that and kind of miss that, kind of skip a life cycle of a gift where you're like, okay, I'm over that, whatever, when actually you could have created something very beautiful that would have served people, would have nourished you in return, aka would have funded the next phase of your mission if you had given it the proper structure. Because we're always going to keep being initiated, right? There's things that I'm learning now that I'll teach later. But right now I'm iterating and maturing on the things that I've already been given. And for some of you, right, you're embracing that maturation. You're saying, okay, I've been iterating. What takes this to its final form? What structure needs to be created so that I am not a bottleneck for this reaching all of the people that are meant to receive it, which is not about your mental idea of how many people will benefit from your gifts. It's about essentially queuing up God and saying, I've done my best. I'm not holding this thing back anymore. I don't have to spoon feed the food to people anymore. Someone could access this if they needed it at any moment. This can look a lot of different ways depending on your business. This can look like a book for teachings. It can look like a course for teachings. It can look like a product that is really refined. And it obviously looks like all of the automations and the systems and the structures that are tangibly keeping that thing going. So initiation, experimentation, iteration, maturation, those are your stages of spiritual business. Feel free to put in the comments below, what stage are you in? And based on what I have shared today, what's your next right action? I'm very big on next right action, especially right now in this time where, we're Saturn in Pisces again, Saturn in Aries is coming back. It's very easy to be there's a lot of needing to trust the flow right now, learn how to surrender more deeply, but it's also very easy to kind of get lost in the fog right now and be like, great idea, I had an insight, but then how are we bringing it into material form? How are we going from being these mystical beings who have brilliant ideas to being tangible creators of the new era by doing the work to bring our gifts into a tangible form? So awesome. Someone's in maturation phase. Beautiful. Congrats. It's amazing when you get to maturation, right? You can't force yourself there. That's something that I've naturally been stepping into, I would say, in the last 2 to 3 years, right? Doing a lot of iteration, but then with maturation in sight, right? Knowing that that's where I'm going. So congrats on that. And those of you on the replay, feel free to put that in the chat. We're going to begin to wrap this up. Multiple phases at once on different ideas. That's very common. We were talking about that in the masterclass as well, right? There are that's part of the cycle as well, is that it's kind of like building a garden in different stages, where you have your more mature fruit trees, let's say, that are producing fruit without as much energy from you because you put the energy in. And you're like, that's my apple tree. Old, reliable. That's my avocado tree. I've lived in places where there's avocado trees and they produce so much when it's their time. And you have things that are nourishing you. This is also why it's so important to do right by the gifts that you're given. Because I'll see a lot of people who burn things down because they're like, oh, I'm over that. But they had some level of a spiritual responsibility, or at least strong invitation from life to give that gift an enduring form that would continue to support people, and that would also be a financial foundation for their next level, right? So that they're eating those avocados, those apples, whatever that fruit is, they've got that system going, and then they're free to say, okay, what's my next thing? What's the next thing that I'm being called to? What's my most recent initiation? What am I inspired to do? And you see people who are very successful in business and art do this very well, where they do something and they allow it to continue to exist, and that becomes the next step, and then they continue to grow from there. So the maturation of one thing is essentially the floor of the next level, right? You keep going. But if you keep cutting down the fruit tree that you just grew to be like, it's out of alignment for me to be an apple farmer anymore because I'm more inspired by persimmons now, or I want to go into a leafy green phase. That's where you can hear, as I explain this metaphor, how absurd that would be, right? And how natural it is to allow the ecosystem of your business and your service to continue to grow. And if something's really meant to phase out and not go to maturation, that will naturally happen, right? I used to do a lot of corporate consulting, and I don't do that anymore. If one of those companies called me, sure, and maybe there will be another season where I'm showing up more as a speaker, or I actually get called to turn some of my teachings into workshops for business environments with bigger teams again. But that phase essentially naturally completed as I was being called to go deeper in the gifts that were even more authentic to me, right? If you think about Gay Hendricks' zone of competence, excellence, and genius, some of the corporate consulting that I was doing was definitely a zone of competence and excellence. I was very good at it, but was it my true zone of genius? Maybe it was for a moment, but now the leading edge of my zone of genius is this, right? So, awesome. Someone says, so it's okay to plant a garden versus focus on just one, which I'm told a lot. You know, it really depends. I think there is wisdom in focusing. To even use the fruit tree metaphor, when you're growing a fruit tree, you cut off a lot of the branches because you want to let the maximum life force go to certain branches so that you can have your first rounds of mature fruit. It can be a kind of sneaky self-sabotage thing when you have too many irons in the fire. You're like, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And sometimes it's like the garden's popping. You know, if you look also at the metaphor of a family, sometimes people are like, okay, I have my one kid, and then 3 years later I have my another kid. Sometimes people are like, you know, I have a friend, she had 3 kids in essentially 2 years, right? She had one baby and then she had twins. And that was just the sole plan for their family. Boom, big family, all of a sudden. And that was the divine design. So there can be a divine design to having multiple irons in the fire. Only you will know, like, and you can just sit with yourself. Is there something that is meant to be my main focus right now that gets most of my energy, and then I give it to the other things? Or am I actually still kind of in an experimentation phase where I'm just letting myself have an experience? Really, when you're graduating to iteration is when you want to make sure that you have enough energy to take something all the way. And also as a manifesting generator or generator, depending if that's your design, it can be, you know, Christina right now, she's working on Story Map. She's going to lead her next group soon. And that's a big focus of her work. And she's also super lit up about this other writing project that she's doing, and just amazing expression of her creativity. And her being so lit up about that other project is bringing a lot of magic and life to the story map project as well, right? So, and if she was just like, no, it's just story map time, I can't look at anything else, then, you know, she's a management. She wouldn't be lit up, and the people who receive the work wouldn't be feeling that, right, as powerfully. So there can be divine design to having multiple things going on at once, kind of to mix the metaphor again. When you're doing permaculture farming, you have multiple crops planted together, and some of them need to grow together at the same time because they're connected. And, you know, to use a family metaphor, different members of the family need different things at different moments. Having a new infant may bring a new quality of the relationship that you have with your toddler or with your grandma. So it's a holistic thing. And yeah, okay, so you're a projector. I'm a projector as well. You may just sit with, ultimately, the divine guidance of, okay, here are the different options that I have. Can I tune in with myself and just get really quiet and ask for divine guidance? Am I overdoing it? Which one of these projects wants my full attention now? What does that look like? And you may be getting a lesson in also delayed gratification and saying, cool, I know what I'm going to be building. Like I'm so focused on God as my boss right now, and I have been for some time. And I have another offer that I'll be talking more about in a couple of months. And that's, you know, it's simmering on the back burner. I get ideas about it every day on my walks and talks with God. And when I'm inspired, sometimes I make a little something for it, or I move it forward a little bit. But the discipline is, this is what I'm focused on right now. And if it was too diffuse, then I wouldn't be properly stewarding the current assignment. And the last thing I'll say here is that it can be, because you're saying as a visionary, it can be definitely a growing edge for visionaries to not just have a million amazing new ideas all the time, but to say, can I, as Henry David Thoreau says, can I put a foundation under the castle that I've built in the sky? And he says something like, that's where they should be. You've built your vision, you've built your castle in the sky, but now put a foundation under it. And what is ready for you to do that? And you can also say, okay, if I'm called to do these 3 things at once, what conditions in my life need to change? What needs to be removed? Who do I need to hire? How do I need to build a team? How do I need to summon those people in? Right? So either changing the circumstances or embracing them and saying, how do we make this work? And ultimately, as you'll hear me say many, many, many times, it's about divine guidance, right? It's about that inner knowing, which is, and so much of what I'm doing here, what I'm riffing on, is what we do within God as My Boss, where we work on concepts, frameworks, strategies for what is my true core offer next? Where am I in the phases of my business? What is my next assignment? How do I do that fully? How do I build that offer? How do I build a bridge from my people to that offer? How do I let it grow? How do I share about it? How do I sell about it? How do I become the person who can put it out there, alchemize my fears, burn off that resistance, all of that inner game? And also, how do I become better and better at being internally guided, so that when I have a question of, is it too many things or is it just the right amount, I'm able to have a deeper connection to that knowing within myself. And that's what I love about God as My Boss, is that it's such a powerful expression of the outer and the inner. And I'm not just saying, hang out with God and everything will work out. I'm saying nothing will work out on your soul's path until you are receiving that divine guidance, and you also need certain tools and frameworks that I have taken quite some time, a veritable decade of my life, to distill. So we're going to wrap this up now. Next steps for you. do something based on what you learned today. If you want for accountability, put it in the comments on the replay. Do something with what you've learned. If you haven't watched the masterclass and you're resonating with these teachings, that's your next step. Go do that, comment masterclass, and you'll get the replay there. It's about 2 hours long. And then if you know, it's my time, I'm ready to build my business, I'm ready to start it, or I'm ready to really grow it in the way that I know is doing right by my divine assignment, because the people for whom this is right, there's a natural feeling of, whoa, business is the next step on my path. Like, this is an essential part of my mission. And by the way, we talk about that in the masterclass. How do you know if that's even true for you? If that's still a question, then the class will help you with that. So for those for whom that call was very clear, it's time to grow my business. It's time to go to that next level. It's time to give my gifts an enduring form. And it's time to have the impact and the income that I know that I'm here to have, to change the world in the process, to be abundantly resourced. Then I invite you to check out God is My Boss. You can comment God is My Boss, all one word. That's the internet elf automation word. You can also just go to the link in my bio. I'll be sharing more about it in divine timing. And for those who feel the call, who know, yes, it's my time, I resonate with Aaron as a teacher, let's go. I want to do the inner and the outer work, and I want to do it now. We have a bonus prep call. So our program doesn't officially start. The first live call for everybody is on October 15th. So we have a bit of time, but I'm doing a bonus prep coaching call next Wednesday. So October 1st, the squad who's sitting in the front row of the classroom saying, I know that I'm in, I want guidance on my next steps, let's do it. Then if you join by then you can be a part of that. Awesome. You're so welcome. This and the masterclass has been very helpful. Honestly, it is truly an honor to transmit these teachings, because I know what it's like to be asking these questions and to only see examples of business and spirituality that felt like it was missing something, right? It felt like I didn't quite see how it would fit together. I couldn't see that path of, how do I have a successful business? How do I do right by my gifts? And how do I do it in a way that doesn't make me feel like I'm just in the old paradigm, selling a piece of my soul, right? Because if you resonate with this, you're such a high integrity being that you would rather not do it than do it wrong, right? And that's a very intense place to be. There's perfectionism that can be cleared, but there's also a real soul integrity that is to be respected. So if that's you, I honor you, and that is why I've answered the call to transmit all of this. All right, folks, masterclass, God is My Boss. We'll be back here next Tuesday. We'll do an interview with my beloved Christina. She's going to share about her business. For those of you who are creatives, who are artists, who are more feminine beings, who feel called to live a life of beauty and ease and flow, and also have that feeling of, there's gifts I got to give, and I got to give it a form in a way that works for me, then I think her story will be really supportive for you. So that's a wrap. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and I'm sending you lots of love. Thanks for tuning in.